black Hebrew Israelite, which a lot of people seem to be deceived about. The black Hebrew Israelites, interesting sect of people. Interesting, let's just call it what it is. It's actually a cult. They claim that Israel is in Africa. They claim that the Jews are the real Jews, that they are the real Jews. There are different types of black Hebrew Israelites, or different Hebrew Israelites. Some of them say that it's only black people from Africa that are the real Jews. Some of them include black and Hispanic people, Mexicans, and so on. Everyone, except white people, are the Jews. They twist the Bible quite a bit. They misread scripture a lot. And, I'm going to show something here when it comes to knowing the truth, knowing the actual truth. Things that the black Hebrew Israelites say that Israel is not in that part of the world. It's in Africa, and how this name was renamed to that name, and the river isn't that river, it's another river. They misread Genesis 13:1, where it says that Abraham traveled south, and they think that south means to Africa, because Africa is south of the Middle East, and but they don't read it correctly. They don't read it correctly at all. The boundaries of Israel was given in Ezekiel 47, the same Bible that they read. Okay? And these places in the Middle East, many of them kept their name from since ancient times. For example, Damascus is the Damascus of the Bible. Okay? And archaeological findings prove all of this. So the boundaries, it says on the north side, on the east side, on the south side, on the west side. Right? In verse 21 it says, you are to distribute this land among yourselves according to the tribes of Israel. So we see the graphic there on the left. Shows that. There are no archaeologists in Africa digging for artifacts of Israel or the Babylonians ruling the Holy Land. There are no archaeologists in anywhere in Africa looking for artifacts, digging for the Holy Land. Nobody. Because they know the truth. You can tell Hebrew Israelites that no archaeologists are digging, looking for Solomon's temple or David's palace. No, they're not looking for that. Okay? So that is a deception right there, and they can read it right in Ezekiel 47. Continuing now, we see that the archaeological findings, and this is just an example of three, but archaeological findings, the Western Wall, right? Even where the Dome of the Rock is built, all this stuff is traced back. The Dome of the Rock and Alaska Mask and so forth, these things are hundreds and hundreds of years old. The Western Wall, hundreds of years old. They've done all kind of excavations and the timelines and go back in history and the writings and so forth. All of that took place in history, and they've discovered all this stuff. There are no questions. That's why no archaeologist is in Africa looking for Israel, because that would be absolutely crazy. Okay. We also have the Dead Sea Scrolls that confirm the Old Testament. Okay. That was discovered in 1947 when Israel was voted back in. That is also prophetic. Okay, Jonathan Kahn does a very interesting teaching as to even the timing of when the Dead Sea Scrolls was discovered, ties back to one of those tools that God would have used to show that it is Him. Okay, the Dead Sea Scrolls being discovered in Israel confirms, and remember, the Dead Sea Scrolls were written even before Christ, so they're over 2,000 years old. They weren't discovered in Africa. Last one here, uh, you know, even the seal of King Hezekiah that ruled over Jerusalem. All of this has been found in the land of Israel. No artifact from the Holy Land has been discovered in Africa. So the Hebrew Israelites are dead wrong. We already covered they're dead wrong from biblically, they're dead wrong from Bible prophecy, and they're wrong even when it comes to archaeology. Sad that people are believing this stuff, but um, if you read and study and you ask the Lord for grace and mercy and revelation, then deception will be far from you. And pray and ask that the Lord keeps deception far from you. This slide, I'm not going to get too much into. I'm just going to explain the overview of it. But God had actually uh, showed when the nation of Israel was going to be restored. You can actually calculate the time, which is what the gentleman Aldridge was seeking to do in the book Fullness of Nations, trying to calculate when Israel was going to be a nation again. He was close, but he was a little bit off. So you have to know history, you have to know Bible prophecy, and a little bit of maths. Now God had told Ezekiel, this is in Ezekiel chapter 4, to lie on his side for 430 days, representing 430 years of judgment. Okay? Anyone can read this. Uh, but out of that, so the total judgment years was supposed to be 430. Okay? And by the way, that number 430 is also prophetic. There's a whole teaching on that. Because if you take when the Ottoman Empire ruled the Holy Land, in from 1517, and you add 430 years, you get the year 1947. Anyhow, that's on the side, that's in the expanded teaching. So God had told Ezekiel to lie on his side 430 days, representing 430 years. 70 of those years, as we read from Jeremiah 25, was Babylon's rule. Okay? And in Leviticus 26, which we read already, God had told them, when I punish you, if you still disobey, I'm going to multiply your punishment 7 times. Wow. 7 times greater. This is why I said the Jews did not have it easy. Okay? They did not have it easy, even for our salvation. So Leviticus 26:18. So multiply 7 times. And it is repeated. Leviticus 26 is a fascinating uh, uh, quite fascinating passage and chapter to read in terms of what God promised to do to the Jews. Um, it's quite intense reading. Let's just use that word, intense reading. Uh, but from 606 BC, you can actually calculate the year 1948. Okay, and we're gonna show the calculation here. We're gonna show the calculation here. And so from 430 years minus the 70 years of Babylon. Okay, that is when you're going to punish for 30 years. And the first punishment was the Babylonian captivity. Everybody was carted off to Babylon. And so after Babylon, God reviewed everything and said, you guys are still living in disobedience. I even told you to submit to the king of Babylon. I told you to submit to Nebuchadnezzar, my servant. I told you to settle down and build houses there and see the prosperity of Babylon. But you guys rebelled. You didn't obey. So 360 years of judgment left. So here's what I'm going to do, God says. I'm going to activate this promise. I'm going to multiply it by 7. And so that exile judgment moved from 430 to 2,520 years. 2,520 years. Okay? And that's quite a thing. Quite a thing. Now, you have to use, like I said, I don't want to make this complicated, right? I don't even want to talk about the prophecy in terms of the restoration of Jerusalem that you see here in terms of 1967. That can also be calculated too, okay? But basically, you have to convert the years to days, Okay, 2,520 years is 907,200 days. Okay, and let me bring up the pointer here. Let me bring up the pointer. So we see right here, looking at the calculation, this is small, but looking at the calculation up here. Okay, so we're talking about 606 BC when the Jews were carted off into captivity. Okay, you take 70 years of Babylon, that leaves 360 years left. That is now 537 BC. Okay, and when we now add 907,200 days using 360-day calendar, okay, when you actually add it, you get the year 1948. You get 1948. I show the calculations here. Put it in calendars and so on already. But again, you have to make allowance for the years between BC. There's because there's no such thing as a 0 year, so you have to add a year. And then you have to convert it to days because back then the calendar was 360 um, uh, days in a year and not 365 like how we have. So you have to convert it to days and then add it to the historical time, and you actually get the year 1948. Aldridge was doing this in the fullness of nations, but he didn't get it fully correct. Okay, and an interesting fact, by the way, how you know how it was God. There was 19 years between when the land fell, right, of Judah, the final of God's people in the southern kingdom, 606 BC. Between that and when the Jerusalem was destroyed. Okay, Jerusalem was destroyed later down in 587 BC, which was 19 years after the fall of the nation of Judah. Okay, so 19 years after. Well, it's interesting because Jerusalem was restored 19 years after Israel became a nation. So it's 19 years between 1948 and 1967. So the same time period between when Jerusalem fell and when it was restored was 19 years. Okay, again, that cannot be coincidence. So showing you from prophecy, you can actually calculate the year 1948. As a matter of fact, and this is a bit of a clue, the first time in Deuteronomy um, uh, chapter 30, verse 3, when God had told Moses that I'm going to bring them back. That verse in the Bible, Hebrew Bible, Deuteronomy 30, verse 3, right, uh, is the actual number of verses, is the year in Hebrew of when Israel became a nation. Of when Israel became a nation, because Hebrew years are different than our years. So the Hebrew representation of 1948 is the exact number of verses of the first time God said he was going to bring Israel back as a nation. And he had told Moses that. It was Moses. I hope I didn't say Abraham, but he told Moses that. Okay? So the first time that happened, and again, that cannot be a coincidence. God leave clues. That's why I said you have to know the calendar and how God operates by patterns and so on. So you can calculate from prophecy when Israel was going to become a nation. So as we wind down here, uh, what to keep in mind and pay attention to with Israel. Okay, so let's now look at what God will do in the end as we wind down here. Uh, Joel 3:18-21, prophecies all over. In that day, when Israel is restored, in that day. So you see that term a lot in the Bible, in that day. So we have to know what day is being referred to by reading before. The mountains will drip new wine, and the hills will flow with milk. All the ravines of Judah will run with water. A fountain will flow out of the Lord's house and will water the valley of acacias. Okay? But Egypt will be desolate. Edom, a desert waste, because of violence done to the people of Judah, in whose land they shed innocent blood. Okay, verse 20. Judah will be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem through all generations. Verse 21. Shall I leave their innocent blood unavenged? No, I will not. The Lord dwells in Zion. So the acacias, water, the valley of the acacias, and we covered the land being fruitful, bud and blossom, new wine, flow like milk and honey, prosperity, right? In that day, the mountains will drip. But Egypt will be desolate. Okay? Egypt will be desolate. And the Egyptians who attacked, because the Egyptians, they even lost Sinai. They had another war in 1973, the Yom Kippur War. Okay? Again, there was a loss with that. Israel, they tried to wipe out Israel in 3 major wars. That never worked. Okay? That never worked. It's not going to work because God is watching over Israel. But watch this, and this is relevant to today. God is not going to leave the Palestinians, Hamas. He's not going to leave them just like that for what they did on October 7th. That's not going to happen. And all the people who are anti-Semitic and all the people who persecuted the Jews and all the people, he is not going to leave them guiltless. He is going to avenge his people. No, he will not. He will not leave them unavenged. Okay? And so when we're seeing war, when we're seeing things happen to some people, we can't get too emotional about that. We have to get biblical. And we have to support the right people. And we have to know what God is doing. Okay? We have to know what God is doing. So this is a warning, very strong warning, that Israel is a prophetic time clock. Don't be deceived by the media. Don't be deceived by even your own feelings. Don't get deceived by photos and videos that are contrived for fake compassion. Jeremiah 31:36 say, only if these decrees vanish from my sight, declares the Lord, will Israel ever cease being a nation before me, declares the Lord. So the Arabs won't win. They're never going to win. Not going to happen. So God had said what? God had said what? He made a promise to Abraham. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. Genesis 12:3. Some people say that was for Abraham alone. No, the promise would not have been for Abraham alone. It couldn't have been. Why? Because of why he chose Abraham. It wasn't specifically Abraham. He chose Abraham to make nations out of him. Okay? With the promise. So the nations of the promise, because he made Abraham a promise. So it's the nations of the promise is descending to. And when we look at Numbers 24:9, Balaam repeated the promise when he was asked to curse Israel by Balak. Therefore, the promise is not just for Abraham. It's for the Jewish people. Okay? So that comes to the end of our presentation. Pretty much 2 hours. I know it was long. However, the information is necessary. I thank you for listening. Biblical proof for the Jews. Please do not be deceived. They are God's chosen people. According to Bible prophecy, God confirmed his word. All right? Everything that you're seeing with the war, God is sovereign. God does not want Palestinians in Gaza. He don't even want them in the West Bank. He wants Israel to be fully restored. And sadly, we are emotional. God has always used war to fulfill his purposes. He told Israel, go to war. Israel had to go to war to fight for their freedom. It was war that restored the land in World War One. It was war that restored the land in World War Two. It was war that restored Jerusalem. 1967, and it is war that is going to free God's people, God's covenant people. And so pick a side. Make sure you pick the right side. Thank you very much for listening.